The woman was standing by the window admiring the heavy rain when she suddenly saw what looked like a figure in the window of the building across the street. She squinted at it with a puzzled expression and discovered there was a man staring right at her. Before she could even react, her husband called out to her. She thought she was just exhausted and seeing things, so she didn't think much of it and went back to bed. The next day after she got up, she sat on the couch watching TV and unexpectedly saw a terrifying news report. There had been a murder in the building across the street. The victim was a young woman. This made the woman remember the man in the window the night before. She quickly told her husband everything. He went over to check and saw nothing on the other side. He reassured her, saying it was probably just a coincidence. The woman, afraid of worrying her husband too much, didn't bring it up again. But that incident had already cast a shadow over her heart. Every time she walked down the street, she felt like someone was following her. But whenever she stopped to look, she only saw an ordinary passerby. She thought it was just her nerves playing tricks on her. Wanting to relax, she went into a movie theater. But she had only been sitting for a short while when a man came in and sat behind her. Her gut told her this man was following her. She nervously turned her head trying to see his face, but afraid of getting caught, only managed to see one of his shoes. Then the man even leaned in toward her. An intense unease made her feel like she was sitting on pins and needles. She immediately got up and ran out, preferring to be wrong than sorry. After leaving, she went to a supermarket. She was about to pick up some items when she noticed a man watching her. She thought he was just another customer, so she turned to leave, but she hadn't gone far when she realized that same man was following her. She cautiously looked back and saw the exact same pair of shoes from the movie theater. She was absolutely terrified and concluded that the man was definitely following her, so she hurried to leave, but in her panic, she knocked over some glass bottles. The man heard the noise and looked in her direction. She quickly hid in the nearby emergency exit and peeked through the window. Sure enough, the man had followed her. Just as she didn't know what to do, a supermarket employee suddenly called out to her, telling her there was a back door on the side. She rushed in that direction and managed to escape. After getting home, she firmly told her husband that someone was following her. He found it hard to believe. That same night, he took her back to the supermarket. They asked the staff to review the security footage. The recording showed that while she was hiding in the emergency exit, the man was indeed outside watching her, but her husband said he could have just been looking somewhere else. The woman wasn't willing to let her guard down. She pulled out her phone and took a picture of the man. After getting home, her husband had to work overtime and had no choice but to leave her alone. But what had happened during the day scared her so much she couldn't sleep by herself. She called her husband hoping he would come home soon, but he said no. After hanging up, the woman went to the window, wanting to see if the man really was watching her from the window across the street. Luckily, the window in the building across was closed. Just as she was about to breathe a sigh of relief, someone suddenly knocked on the door. In the middle of the night, this terrified her because she had just gotten married and moved to the small town with her husband. She didn't know anyone or the area. Besides that, her husband was working overtime that night and wasn't home. Being alone in the house naturally made her scared, but the knocking kept going. She had no choice but to muster her courage and check. She looked through the peephole and then opened the door. Turns out the landlord's cat was lost. She had come looking for it, but when she found out the woman had no idea where it was, she turned and left. The woman quickly went back inside. She lay alone on the couch, tossing and turning, unable to sleep, so she pulled the curtain aside to look outside, wanting to see this unfamiliar city. But the next second, she was terrified. She saw the man in the building across the street, seemingly staring right at her. The woman's hair stood on end, but then she thought maybe he was just looking at the stars. Then she gathered her courage and slowly raised one hand to test if the person across was actually watching her. She held it up for a while, and there was no reaction from the other side. She finally breathed a sigh of relief, thinking she was just being paranoid. But just as she was about to close the curtain and go to sleep, out of the corner of her eye, she saw something horrifying. The shadow across the street actually responded to her. Luckily, her husband came home from work at that moment. The woman quickly told him that someone was watching her from the building across the street. But when her husband went to look, he didn't see anything. He thought she was just exhausted and hallucinating, but she was sure she hadn't been mistaken. She immediately decided to call the police. After the police arrived, they asked the woman about the basic situation. Turns out during the day when she was shopping at the supermarket, she had noticed someone following her, and the shadow in the window looked a lot like that man from earlier. She also showed the police the picture she had taken. After hearing everything, the police took her husband to the building across to look for the man. Meanwhile, the woman, too scared, just sat at home waiting for news. But not long after, her husband came back. As soon as he walked in, he had a very serious look on his face. The woman understood immediately that the person living across the street was the man who had been following her, but her husband still thought it might just be a coincidence since they were neighbors. It was normal to run into each other while shopping. It didn't necessarily mean he was following her. Hearing this, the woman was completely disappointed in her husband. She never imagined that marrying far from home would bring her this lack of trust, so the two of them had a huge fight. The next day, her husband left for work as usual, with his backpack on his shoulder, leaving the woman home alone. She was so scared she could only use a chair to block the door. It was the only way she could feel a little safer. She hoped her husband would come home early, but instead she found out he had to work overtime again. Just as the woman was about to fall asleep waiting for her husband, she got ready to go to bed alone. Suddenly, a wave of dread washed over her heart.